Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazzard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the Binge Factor.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Feed Your Brand Center of Influence feature. And I have a new podcaster for you today, Shanna Lee of The Soul Frequency. I love that. And she's got a really interesting podcast because she flips back and forth between interviews and her own solo shows. So I'm excited to talk to her because it's one of the things we recommend here all the time on the show. And she's doing it. And so let's find out how that's working for her. But first, let's find out a little bit more about Shanna. Shanna Lee is an intuitive coach, energetic frequency expert, businesswoman and consultant to executives of Fortune 500 companies, celebrities, influencers, and fashion industry experts. I hope we get to talk about that too. She's the #1 best-selling author of The Soul Frequency, Your Healthy, Awakened, and Authentic Life, and the founder of The Soul Frequency, as well as the Soul Frequency Show podcast, which is leading the conversation on raising your energy frequency and creating a life and business founded on truth and alignment. I look forward to really talking about that right now because that's exactly where I am. With over 2 decades of experience in sales, marketing, and business development, coupled with her powerful intuitive gift of insight, she's an expert in leading purpose-driven individuals to move through the necessary choices and changes to align with their most powerful, innovative potential. Shanna Lee has been featured in Awareness Magazine and international docuseries Depression and Anxiety Secrets. She's a contributor to Medium, Tiny Buddha, and Elephant Journal, and has been featured in numerous podcasts and international radio shows. And I'm so glad to have her here on Feed Your Brand. Shanna, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm just really excited to talk about the way you decided to start podcasting because, does energy and podcasting and intuitiveness work together?
I guess so, because we've been doing it a couple of years, but in the beginning, I had no idea. And frankly, it was a very spur of the moment decision. I was sitting talking to a friend. It happened very naturally. My friend said, you're fantastic. Because I was interviewing people at the time on Facebook Live. I was doing a lot of Facebook Lives. And he goes, I've been watching you. And these interviews are great. And you have really interesting guests on. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? And I was like, no, I haven't at all. He goes, you should really do that. And you have to know my nature is just to kind of jump in, even though I don't really even know how to swim yet. So I thought, great, I'll start a podcast, no problem, right? So a person on my team and I just literally hit the ground running. And of course, learned so much along the road as you do in life.
I'm sure there was a lot of hiccups along the way, right?
There was a lot of what are we doing here? But now, here we're almost 200 episodes in, and we're about 2.5 years almost into the show. And we've learned so much, and we have a really beautiful, heartfelt, streamlined process that we go through to produce our show. And so it keeps it really fun and it keeps it fresh. And that's what I love about it is it's always someone different. There's always someone new to talk to and to share with. And I learn, right? I mean, I learn from the people that come on my show, which I love.
Well, before we get to why you developed some of those streamlined tips, which I definitely want to get to, are there some really interesting or maybe some funny mistakes that got you to put in a better process?
Oh, you want to start with the mistakes.
That's right. Because we do learn more from failure sometimes.
No, I love sharing my mistakes. One of the things was this is a technical aspect, but when you have an episode, you want to add the metadata to it, right? Which is the keywords and the tracking to it. We didn't discover that till over a year into the show. No one on the team knew about it. And all of a sudden one day I was reading a blog post and they started talking about it. I'm like, and I don't do the editing. My team handles so much of it. And I'm like, hey, do we do this? Do we do this metadata
Do we even
thing?
do that? Yeah.
Do that? And everyone's like, nope. So then we started incorporating that. And that really helped us grow, obviously. But it was a very funny, discovery because I just happened upon it. And here we were chugging along and, you never know. I think at the early days of the show, I think a lot of podcasters that I know and that I've talked to, you have your nerves and you have your nerves about everything from if you have a show with guests on it, are they going to come? Is the audio going to be okay? Like all of the little details that could possibly go wrong, you think about in the early days. And so certainly, we had tech glitches from time to time. We record over Zoom. And so, there's the days where the audio doesn't work. You can't hear them. They can't hear you. I mean, all the fun in technology. So we had plenty of that until we got all that down. And I think the main thing I want to say is that all of those things are gifts that happen. Right. You learn from them. Like if they never happened, you wouldn't learn. And when I think back at all of the things that I'm good at now in podcasting, it usually was learned through having a mistake happen or having an what do we do now? And then figuring out a good workaround.
Yeah. Or a good system in place, right? So it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, that's, I think most common experiences is how to go through that. So just quickly for those of you out there now panicking and Googling metadata and if you are on Monetize, don't worry, we got you covered. But it is actually a really great keyword tool. It's a really great search tool because remember, iTunes has very little to search with it. They got titles and a description, nothing else. So you got to use those terms. It's such a good tip. So thank you for sharing that. Now, has it really helped your business? I think that's the part everyone wants to come back to. Is like, oh, am I monetizing? And I don't like that term because it doesn't imply the idea that maybe you're just growing more leads and you're growing more business. Monetizing kind of sounds like, oh, you should add ads. And your show doesn't have that. So.
Right. Yeah. I think you have to do things that are in alignment with yourself. I do that across my business. And for me, at this juncture, ads don't feel in alignment with what I'm sharing. That's a personal choice. I love shows. I listen to shows that have ads. So I have no thing about it other than it just doesn't feel like the right fit for me. My intention with the show is to put out good energy. Obviously, I talk about energy, how we can have better energy in our lives. And I really started with a very pure intention of putting out good energy. What I know in my business is when you start with a pure intention, you put good energy out, good energy comes back. So whether that's in the form of prospective clients, like people that want to buy your products or your books or whatever you do, I think sometimes we get into a feeling of, I'm going to do this so I can get clients, or I'm going to do this so I can have some end result, which then I feel like sometimes we miss the fun, right? We miss the excitement of it and the fun of it. And so while we all need to have goals and intentions, I think it's also powerful to have them and then kind of let go of them, because podcasting is, it's a commitment. And if you don't enjoy it, right? If it's not fun and you don't show up to it going, yes, like this is going to be great, then you probably won't do it for the long term, right? And so I really think in any type of content creation, it's consistency. Can you create systems that have you be able to show up time and time again? And then once you're showing up time and time again, are you enjoying that? If you can consistently do something in business and enjoy it, you've won. That's amazing.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I love the curiosity factor of podcasting. Like that's where I live. I love the energy of curiosity. So I always want to learn something. And if I can help my marketing of my job, my lead generation, all of those things, and get to be curious at the same time, for me, that's a total win-win, right? I got to do something that I love doing, that I want, that grows me, not just my company. So I completely agree with you. I think that's a great place to be. I also do think so many podcasters get hung up in their numbers and in the too early on, and you haven't given it a chance to work yet. You haven't given it a chance to get that energy across and see what's coming back to you. So I love that you put a long-term commitment in there.
And I think one of the things that goes back to what we were just saying is, if you're worried about your numbers and you're feeling like giving up because the numbers aren't where you want them to be in the early days, I would say to anyone feeling that way, go back and look at your process. And if you're in that energy of curiosity and joy, because you're not going to feel like giving up. You're going to feel like, I'm just getting started. Like, this is fun. I'm having fun with this. But if you enter into it from a place of, I'm doing this for an end goal and it's not fun, then you're probably not going to keep doing it for the long term. And so I think it's all the kind of the mindset we have going in to creating it. And I always say, like, it's a marathon. So if you sprint right out of the gate so fast, like with content creation, and you start trying to do like an episode every day when really that feels exhausting for you, then at some point you're gonna tire out, you're gonna give up. So start with something that feels good and right to you, and that you can do consistently, that you can make it that 26-mile marathon, right? Turning out content at what feels doable for you based on the support you have.
Right. So what you just did there was when you take a topic and then you kind of present a beautiful perspective on it, sort of like a little bit of like, let's not look at it from this is exhausting. Let's look at this as this is fun and I'm ready and I'm just getting started. That's exactly the way Shanna's solo episodes are. She's set a topic for herself, and then she goes in and she talks about it in a way that maybe you hadn't quite thought it through that way before. Like you might have heard about, vibration, or you might have heard about, money mindset, or you might have heard about these different things, but maybe you haven't thought about it quite Shauna's way. And that's where you're really presenting yourself as a wonderful expert. I really enjoyed the fact that you have those and that they are separated from your interview shows. So you have both going on. Did you start that way, or did that come over time? Did you?
No, it started straight interviews. Once a week, we would put out an interview episode. And we've always been consistent with that. And then at some point, I just decided to do what we call sessions, which are 5 to 10 minute, just coaching topics or life topics that happen, where I would kind of just, you picked up on that very well. Like I will talk about something that I get a lot of messages like of people, I struggle with this, or I don't know how to do this, or this is coming up in my life, or what do you have to say about X, Y, and Z? And I just give people a perspective shift. So often we are living our life out of outdated perspectives, or perspectives of other people, our families, or people we grew up with, or someone we work with. And we're looking through a lens that is not beneficial to our life. And so I thought, I'll just get on the mic and I'll just do like what I do with my private clients and in my business, is provide a perspective shift that allows someone to move forward in a new way. And I do that through my intuitive gift, but also just through my years of business experience. And so many people come to me with business questions, and whether it's starting a podcast, or whether it's, how do I scale my business, or I'm stuck, or how do I even start a business, or how do I go from being a W-2 employee to being an entrepreneur, which is a big energetic jump, right?
A huge one.
A huge one, right? It's hard sometimes. And so I just feel that it's funny because, the interview episodes are like 45 minutes. The sessions are 5 to 10 minutes. And I get probably more feedback on the sessions. And people say, oh man, like I put those on and in a quick 5 minutes, I'm thinking differently. So it was purely an idea I had, and then people started to like it. So I keep doing it.
Well, good for you. It's one of the things I recommend most to my clients, is to actually do that, because it gives people a better perspective on you. It's great to be interviewing people and bringing interesting, diverse perspectives, and the networking opportunity and the relationship building that comes from just doing that host-guest relationship like we're doing here right now. Yeah. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't always give everyone an insight into your thoughts and who you are. And it attracts me, if that's what I'm looking for that type of coach or for that type of advice. It attracts me more to that. So I always like, if you can't work it into having separated episodes, make sure you have a special close to your episode that gives your perspective. So like that's also another way to do it. But I love that you did that. I think it was a really smart choice. And I think it really, the way that you play them off of each other too, though, is it seems that there might be some synergy between sometimes the topic that was in either before or after in a guest. So do sometimes the guests get you thinking about a topic as well?
Yeah, sometimes something will come up in the interview and I go, oh, that's a good thing to talk about, just kind of make a mental note about that. Sometimes something will happen with a private client and I think, gosh, a lot of people could really benefit from this. Mm-hmm. So it's a way to anonymously share something that happened in a private session. I don't even mention that it happened in a session, but just to bring that information forward for other people to benefit from it. And so, and we actually, when I created sessions, there's a different intro music for the session episode than there is for interview. So I created almost like a separate branding within
a separate energy,
right? It is. It's a much quieter, mellower song for the sessions episodes than it is for the interview. So I liked that because I felt like it just brought people into a different space. Right. And we're so used to receiving things in a systematic manner. And so when we hear our favorite podcast opening music, it's like, oh, right, I'm ready for this. Right. We get very used to it. And so I wanted to bring people into a different energy that would be unique for each part of the show.
So little bit of cross coaching here. Have you thought about spinning it off into its own series, into its own seasonal series?
That's a great idea. No, I haven't thought about it. One of the things that, it's interesting, we have thought about, because once you do a show for, a couple years, you see people, changing their artwork and changing their music and changing things up. And we've thought about making some changes. But I also was like thinking back to when I was a little kid and you would have your favorite show. And it's like there's a comfort in hearing that same music, right? Or seeing the same opening credits. And so, well, as the producer of the show, you might think, oh gosh, I could do, a new this or a new that. We decided to just really go deep with staying with what we do for the familiarity and the feeling like it's, oh, I'm coming home to the Soul Frequency show where I know what I'm getting and what it is and the type of show it is. So we have decided for the year ahead to not make a lot of big changes, and really just have the warm and cozy, right?
and you should. I like, because I think for you that's part of who you are and part of what your brand is.
Definitely.
What I was thinking more of was that a couple of recent guests we've had on the show had made some suggestions to doing premium content where they have all of those episodes in a separated feed, and maybe it's behind a gate, maybe it's $10. It doesn't have to be expensive, but you have that separate feed so that I found you, I like you, I can just binge listen to those.
I love that.
And so you're not touching your core show. You're just almost creating like a little separate, like, oh, so you want to hear all of these sessions? Well, here they are all in one place for you. Really convenient. So you can just download that playlist and binge listen. So I think for you,
that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I think for you, that'd be a lot of fun. And I think it would help also get that person who's been, who only has so much time, but who is getting to know you. It speeds up the process of them getting to know you because you're now in their ear constantly with all your sessions constantly over a short period of time. So that's always a good way too.
I love that.
Well, good. So sometimes we like to make suggestions here because I've interviewed, I think 75 or almost 100. We're getting close to 100 podcasters here. And everyone has very different ideas about their show. And every so often I hear one, I'm like, ooh, this would work over here. So we have to share.
Yes,
that's right.
Share away, please.
That's right. That's the intuitiveness of it, right? We're like, oh, this is a good connection. So, did you feel that you were good at interviewing before you started interviewing, or did that sort of evolve over time? You said you were doing Facebook Live interviews, but I mean, was that in your core competence before you started podcasting and Facebook Live?
That's a great question. Somewhat, I would say yes, like in the sense that I think quickly on my feet, meaning I will share something really interesting because I think so fast. Like you can put me in any situation and I'll be able to speak. But some people are not like that, right? Some people really like to process information prior to, they really want questions prior to. So when I started interviewing other people, we tend to to a fault, think that other people's brains operate like ours do.
Imagine that.
I know, imagine that. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it's like one day someone was like, well, can you give me this 2 weeks in advance? And I was like, oh my gosh, there are people that want information this far in advance. So it made me think differently. It made me broaden the way I looked at how I could be a great host to all guests, right? Not just how I show up, right? Or what I need, but what other people need. And I think that's the area that's really expanded for me, is like being able to talk to as many people as I have. You realize what some people might want and what other people might want. I think the one thing with hosting that I think I was pretty good at it, but I would get nervous with some guests. So if somebody was like, I got to interview on my Facebook Live, John Gray of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
I know him. I've met him. Yeah.
In the earlier
and he's so
days,
smart. So I could see why you're
and I was like, I had loved that book, right? And this was like early on in my Facebook Live days. And I met him at an event and he and I hit it off, and he was like, I would love to come on your show. And then I thought to myself, like, what am I doing? I don't even, I don't know if I'm good enough to do that. So with his interview, like I was just nervous. And so it took me a moment to just get in sync with him and start talking. But once we got in the moment, it was fantastic. So one thing I would recommend for people that feel nervous about that is just really doing some deep breathing, prior to getting on. And then we did before we started, just talk for a while, have a conversation, get in that person's energy, get to know them a little bit, right? Ask them a few questions so that you get comfortable. And then hit record, right? Don't just jump right into it, because they want to get to know you too. Like, both people need a time to just kind of small talk. And then I find that everybody's nerves calm down and you move forward.
Absolutely. I find that too. I also recommend that if you're new to interviewing, that you don't draft your questions all the way out, that you bullet point them, but don't draft them out, because then you will read them, which makes you sound even more nervous. So like, that's a really bad idea. So if you just bullet point and said, oh, my first question is going to be about this. Okay, great. Now you have a guideline. You're not going to be too nervous, but you at least aren't going to be like, what is my question now?
Yes, exactly.
So don't give yourself a crutch if you don't need it. So, well, wonderful. I want to get to some of the nitty gritty tips, because you're doing well with getting your show out there. And that's one that I think that's probably the hardest thing that people find when they come to it. I mean, there's all sorts of tech issues with setting up your show, but they're not insurmountable. You can Google them, you can ask an expert, and you'll figure them out, right? Yeah. Or you'll just do them and you'll make a mistake and you go, let's do it different next time, right? As you mentioned. But getting your show more listeners, more guests, all of those things, those are outreach. And so I want to talk about some of your best practices for doing that. So what are some lessons or stories and best ways to book great guests, to go get a John Gray?
Well, we have a whole booking system that we use now. One of the easiest ways is to get out there in the world, like live events and things that you can go to where someone, if you have a certain speaker you want to have on your show and they're going to be speaking at a live event, go there, because you usually can meet with them after they talk and start a conversation and connect with them. And it's always nice to have a face-to-face live in-person meeting, which is helpful. I also we batch our show. So we produce a lot of content. I can talk more about that if you're interested about how we do that. But so I look at people who have books coming out that I think are interesting. It's always a good tip. Like, if someone has a book coming out, they want to be on the show, right? They're probably going to be on like 40 podcasts, and why not yours? And they are kind of geared up and they have time in their schedule to do that. Like, that's where their intention lies. And sometimes you reach out to people and it's just not the right time in their life. They don't have anything to promote, or they're very busy working on getting a program up or a project up. And so don't be discouraged by that. It's like, I think it's really smart to look at booking guests who have the bandwidth for that at the time, because there's something they're actually going to be promoting. So I always look at some of my books that I think are going to be interesting that are coming out. That's how we book guests. Also asking guests that have been on the show who I have a good rapport with, if there's anyone now that they've done the show that they feel would love to do the show.
That's a great plan, right? Because they already know it's a fit. So.
And they have a whole world of people that they're, and if you liked them and they're cool, chances are their friends and colleagues are cool as well. So that's a great way to just, get some names and reach out to people, or ask them if they'll make an introduction for you to their friend. And obviously that's a simple yes, usually, if you get introduced by a good friend of somebody. So there's so many different creative ways. And I think, sometimes people get discouraged, or they tell me they get discouraged in reaching out, and people ask them, well, what are your numbers? Or what is this? Or how many people download it? And it's just like, if you're new and starting out, you're thinking, I can't do that. And don't be deterred by that, right? It just might mean this guest doesn't have a bandwidth right now for certain shows, or they're not doing a lot of interviews. Don't take it personal. And just go on there's going to be plenty of people that would love to come on your show and talk about what they do in the world. Your job is to keep your chin up and go find those people.
Well, and I'll do my part on my side, because I can't tell you how many episodes I've said this on, but on my side, if the PR firm or the guest is out there seeking a show that has a certain level of downloads as their criteria, they're going to go all kinds of wrong. I can tell you that. It's better to have a nice fit between us in terms of our audience and our topic and all of those than it is to go for numbers on the guesting side too. So remind them of that. You can. So I love that. Well, the second thing that's really hard for people, besides the sort of like the mechanics of let's get great guests and, that'll be a draw to the show, but increasing listeners is daunting. That sounds like, how do I do that? Isn't iTunes supposed to do that? Isn't this supposed to magically happen?
Yeah. And it's kind of, the more you're out there in the world, I think the more you're talking about your show, the more people are going to learn about it. And so, again, another thing, when you are booking certain people on the show, you might have a guest on that maybe doesn't have a huge following yet, but you could talk to them about, hey, come on my show, and then maybe I can go on yours, and try to do like a show swap. So at least your show is getting out there as well, or you're talking about your show. If you go to live events, right, you should have cards with your show name on them. You should just be talking about your show to anybody and everybody you can. Like, and I always say, start in your own backyard. Like, who is your sphere, your circle, your friends, the people that love you, and ask them to share. It's so funny. People do not want to ask the people in their life to share about things. Like, we're nervous, right? What if they say no? And then I'm going to be upset and sad about it.
I get this so often that when I say to people, I was like, how are you sharing your show on social media? And they will say, oh, I'm putting it on my page. And I said, well, how many followers does your page have? And they're like, well, not a lot. And I was like, why aren't you sharing it in your personal profile? Oh, because, it has my friends and my family in it. And I was like, does that matter? It shouldn't matter. You should be proud of your show.
Yeah, exactly. And you should ask them to share. Like, every time I'm coaching somebody, whether it's some of my celebrity clients or any of my clients, they'll always be nervous about asking somebody to help spread the news about a show they're going to do, or an event they're having, or whatever. And I'm like, people want to help you.
They do.
They want to be asked. Like, and it's so funny because every single time, I would say 10 out of 10 times, I'm like, go ask 15 people of your friends and see if they'll share. Every single time they do. Yeah. And so I'm like, everybody will tell you when you create a successful business, it's because of the people you know. It's because of the community you create and how you synergistically come together and help each other. So we can't live on an island by ourselves and create businesses and podcasts that are, that are going to grow and be successful.
Right. So we better outreach. We better ask. We better go out and tell people about it. I love that. Now, you mentioned just briefly something about streamlining your process. And normally I ask how people produce it in a professional way. And they say things like, get a good microphone. But I would love for you to touch on that streamlining process, because I think that's going to really help people.
Yes, this is my secret sauce, you guys. You should use this. So at a certain point, especially when we started doing the sessions episodes, we are putting out 2 episodes a week. That's a lot of content, right? It's a lot of moving parts with show notes and, editing and all the different pieces of the puzzle you go through. And the fact that I am coaching all the time, we said we need to have a process for this. And I need to be able to sit down at one time and kind of do all of this and then forget about it, because it's too hard to return to the task, right? Twice a week, and then have to monitor editing, have to monitor all the pieces of the puzzle. So we basically, we book probably a month to 2 months out on the show as far as interview episodes. So we have a backlog. And then let's say for February's episodes this coming year, they're all going to be completed in January at the same time. It's usually about the 3rd weekend of January. I sit down and I record all of the intros at the same time for all of the 4 interview episodes. And what's great about this is if you are promoting something like a program that you run, right, or you're coaching, it gives you an opportunity to sit down and say, how do I want to promote this over these 4 episodes? And I'm going to record 4 different intros. I'm going to talk about it in 4 different ways in these intros, to look at it from different lenses, right? And maybe share some testimonials in one, and maybe talk about a story in another. So you're able to kind of look at what the whole month is going to be like for your audience at the same time.
I love this. This is like bigger picture look at your show, which I really like, because most people get in the micro details, right?
Right. This is like, and it works out so well. And then I sit down usually the next day and I do the 4 sessions episodes. So I'm doing all of my part. Like, I'm interviewing people, when we can schedule time throughout the month. I'll maybe do 4 to 6 interviews per month at a different time, but I'm always a month ahead, so that once I can sit down in January with February's episodes and just go through all of them in a weekend, and then basically send them to editing, get the show notes done. And so we're ready to go. And this helps my team be able to schedule everything ahead of time. This is how we stay consistent on our side of things. If we were doing it piecemeal, it would just, life happens. I also have had moments where I'm like, when we go through like cold and flu season and things like that, I'm like, oh man, I can't lose my voice.
I can't record right now. I've had that happen to me too. Yeah.
So it helps with that type of thing too, where it's like, if you have them done ahead of time, you're not going, oh no, I got sick. Like I'm in trouble.
Well, but the other thing that does happen when you do a show a lot and people binge listen to it, they'll hear that you have a cold on one episode. And then like 4 weeks later, there's like another one because you recorded them on the same day. And they'll be like, oh yeah, that must've been when she was sick. Yeah. Like, and they'll message me, I hope you're feeling better.
Yeah. No, that's so funny.
Love that. But you know what? Batch recording, pre-planning, all of that, that's such great advice for how to produce it more professionally. But it comes across in your show because your show definitely has that synergy between the episodes of interviews and the episodes of sessions, as you call them, so that there's a synergy between them. And it's because you're stepping back and taking a look at what kind of overall message you want to get across with using both of them. So such great planning. Great job on that. This is why all of you should check out her show, the Soul Frequency Show, because you want to make sure that you hear these great tips. Plus, you're going to get a lot out of the sessions. I already have. So now, encouraging engagement. How do you get, you were starting with Facebook Live, so I'm assuming obviously you got some good engagement there already, but how do you keep encouraging that? Podcasting feels a little more passive.
I think you can build a community. And I did not do this on the show at the beginning. If you go back and listen to the first couple episodes, I was doing great interviews, but I wasn't like talking to everybody like we're all together on this journey and we're a community. And over the time, obviously, as people have interacted with me, it does feel like a family. And I do feel the people's energy when I'm recording these things. And I do, kind of have gotten to know groups of people that listen to the show. And I think great content gets shared. Like over the, people will say, oh my gosh, I love this episode. I sent it to 3 of my friends. Like it grows. And I also think when you commit to something and people know that you're going to show up for them, like, then they know that they can trust you. Yeah. Like if you're doing episodes and you disappear for a while and then you come back, it's almost like you're starting over to some degree because you broke trust. And what's weird about that is that you, especially at the beginning, may not even know who's listening to the show. They may not be sending you messages. It might you're just putting all this like information and energy out, but you don't realize that Becky every Monday waits for your show to come out. And if you don't show up one Monday, she's like, what? And you would never even know that, right? And so you have to like, kind of just tell yourself, like, there are people that wait there for these shows to go live and they're expecting you to be there for them. And even if you never get to meet them, you're having an impact on their life. And they're taking this information and doing things in their life that you may never even know about. But so it's building that consistency because that's how we build relationships.
Well, and I love that idea of like looking at that as a family energy, because, when you really think about that, that's your community. That's the community that you want to nurture, right? So if you live in the energy of that's what I'm creating, and as you get to know the people within it, now you have this pictures in your mind, you get to know parts of personality. It changes how you deliver it and the power with which you deliver it. So that's a really great way, because I think that will build on itself as well. So the last one we talked a little bit about this, but what's the best way that you've seen that this is translated into monetization for your business, that this is coming? Because we talked about not doing ads, which I thought completely makes sense for you, but how have you seen it translate into business for you?
So I have a program called the Soul Frequency Experience, and I created the program based on some of the 4 parameters in my book, The Soul Frequency, Your Healthy, Awakened, Authentic Life. And I really wanted to make this coaching available to anybody, right? That it would be at a price point that people could go deeper with this. And so I launched the program. Like I had no idea what it was going to become or be. It's a small group program. And that is really people coming from the podcast. So I created something that was easily accessible. Not everybody can do the private coaching with me. It just doesn't, fit into their life or their budget. But I really wanted to create that. And so the book and that are the primary areas where I see the influx of business. Some of the people in that program become one-on-one clients after that. And I have had a couple one-on-one clients come through the podcast. So that's, I would say,
it's a warming up process is what it sounds like.
Process. And it's also, it's a next step of closeness because I run the program live. So for people that listen to my voice all the time on the podcast, it's the opportunity is to come into now a video format where we are live there video and I'm coaching people and it's a small group. So nobody gets left behind, right? We all get to know each other. And it's like taking that sacred circle of the podcast and making it even tighter and more intimate and getting to know each other better. And so that was really the intention with the program. It far surpassed anything I even thought possible. We ran it last year several times. We're going to run it several times again this year. It's been one of the most gratifying things I've ever created. And the circle is so tight of all the people that have graduated from it. So it's been awesome.
That's wonderful. Now, what about outside? So, those are our like sort of best practices, best ways to, but there's got to be some things that you surprised you as like you got invited to do an event or be featured in something that you were like, wow, I didn't realize how much authority having a podcast built for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, She Podcast Live is a great example. Going and speaking there. I've spoke at a number of like entrepreneurial women's events and been invited off of the podcast. You never know where the information goes and who's going to hear it. So I've been on docuseries, I've been on tons of different podcasts, and people have had me on. People pitch my show all the time now, right? So you have people reaching out all the time to be on the show. I mean, that wasn't happening in the early days at all. I would have loved to have gotten an email from somebody wanting to be on the show, right? Instead of having, I was like, thanks.
Instead of like, who else do I message this week? I'm behind. I need 4 this month.
Exactly. It's a little bit of juggling. And so eventually you reach like a tipping point where that energy changes, right? Instead of you going out there and kind of chasing after it, it starts coming more towards you. And so that's what's happened over the years. I would say, right around the 1 year mark is when I felt like I had an established show, and then it started getting more and more fun. And I would say that all of my production time, like as far as when I used to do the intros at the beginning, I would literally write everything out, right? And really think about it. And now it's like, you just turn it on and roll with it. So everything gets easier, I feel like, in a lot of ways. Obviously, you're able to hire more help as time goes on. But if you can make it through that beginning, I mean, this is a life lesson about everything. If you can make it through that beginning, right, stretch, then it just becomes easier and more fun as time goes on.
I absolutely agree. Well, last thing I want to talk about, because I mentioned that I thought that you should make a little spinoff that's more binge listenable. Because of what you talk about so much, I'd love your view of the power of binge listening. What does that do from an energetic perspective?
Yeah. So if you think about the hours that you're awake every day, let's say 16 hours, 18 hours, whatever it is, everything that you're taking into your energy, right, is affecting your life, your perspective, the way you move through the world. And I think that podcasts are one of the most profound ways that we can shift our life. Meaning, let's say you're around negative people in your life a lot, or living with negative people, or at work is a negative situation. A podcast is something you can put on and literally enter a different energetic frequency of thought. Like you can listen to some of your best like motivational speakers or intuitives or anybody like that inspires you, and it takes you into a new perspective. And so the more you listen, right? Like if you, let's for example, let's say you took 10 hours of your day while you were cleaning, making lunches or whatever, running your business, like on the treadmill, whatever you do, and you just listen to powerful messages, your life will change from that alone. So the more time you spend in positive energy of your waking hours, not complaining, not wishing things were different, not, being in bad energy, your life will elevate at that level. So if you just took off on an island and listened to positive things all the hours you're awake every day, it would change your consciousness in a very short amount of time.
Well, and so that's the power on the other side for you as a podcast host, right? To be saying, I have the power to shift their energy, change their vibration,
Absolutely.
move them into a more powerful place. Let me use it for some good, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Shanna, I am so glad we got to meet each other, and I am so glad you came on the show, because there's just been some wonderful pieces of advice here that I think a lot of people can take away from, especially, some of your thoughts about process. We don't talk about that a lot. People like to talk about tools and little tech things, but talking about the process of how you do it and how you put it in your daily life, that's been extremely valuable. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. And thank you for being here.
So everyone, you can find Shanna Lee on our blog post at feedyourbrand.co. We'll have all the links to the Soul Frequency, to her programs, to her podcast, to her directly. And we'll make sure that you have all of that at feedyourbrand.co. We also have, of course, you can reach out to us on @feedyourbrand pretty much everywhere on social media. I think it might have a couple of underscores in it on Instagram, but you'll still be able to find us. And you'll be able to see some of the images and audiograms. So if you're only listening to this, you can see some of the video. So everyone, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you letting me share these great Center of Influence interviews and what it's beginning to change my mindset about how we might structure shows and how we might change things up and how we might market better. I'm learning so much, and I hope you are too. If you have anyone to suggest, you know how to reach out to us. Next time, I'm going to be bringing you back, not just because we're headed into our new year with this episode. I'm not going to be only just bringing you Center of Influences, but we have a higher, stronger commitment to a lot more tech shows as well. And we'll be doing spinoffs. So there's lots of new things to come in the new year. So stay tuned. Thank you everyone for listening. This is Tracy Hazzard on Feed Your Brand.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.